first and most important idea in economics is that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and that God created man, that is male and female, in his image. And not only that, that God gave a command to mankind to fill the earth and subdue it, and to exercise dominion over the creation. That is the idea on which all sound economics is based, because it shows that man is made to interact with the earth, and that man is made because of his relationship with God, because he's like God, because God is a creator. Man who's made in God's image is a creator too. God creates out of nothing just by uttering a word, let there be. Mankind, on the other hand, a sub-creator, takes the things that God has made, the resources that God has given to him as a gift, and moves them to a higher level, improves them, takes them from a lower value to a higher value. That's what exercising dominion and filling and subduing the earth is all about. And because we're made that way, because God gave man the mission of making the earth more fruitful, God therefore has given the earth the mission of responding to that, of being receptive to that, of opening its hand to us. And if you do not have this idea as part of your economic system, which most modern economics does not, you will tend to underestimate the ability of mankind to be productive when entering into various forms of enterprise. Why? Because you'll miss the fact that the earth, creation, and humanity, made in God's image, run on the same software, the software of God's creative intelligence, that we're made to work together, that we're compatible. It's not Mac and PC, it's PC and PC. Compatibility. Many modern philosophers of science say, why is it that mathematics works so well? It's a human creation. Why does it work so well in exploiting the opportunities of the earth, in improving things, in technological advance? It's a mystery. It's only a mystery if you leave God out of the picture. If you put God in the picture, you understand that the earth is made to respond to us. Therefore, we are more productive than a godless economic system would lead us to believe. We are extremely productive. The earth is productive in and of itself. It's fruitful. The trees with the fruit, and inside the fruit are the seeds, and out of the seeds come more trees. And so the fruit of the earth multiplies. It yields, to use the biblical language. Man makes the yielding yield even more. Man can fertilize, water, prune, put things in proper order, and make the natural yield and fruitfulness of the earth even more fruitful than it would normally be. But on top of that, man, meaning male and female, are themselves yielders of new generations. From their relationship come children. And so they yield more people. And this is a very important idea in economics, that the source of productivity in the earth is the creation of new generations, that human beings are more mind and hand than they are mouth, that each new human being is a blessing who can make all of us more productive. And when this happens, it can greatly exceed the expectations of even the most optimistic people. And if you look at this is going to look a little like economics, but don't let that scare you, because it's a really very simple idea. It's called the production possibilities frontier, and that probably scared you again because that sounds like an economics textbook kind of title, and it's probably in the beginning of most economics textbooks. But it's a really simple idea. It just shows that there is a trade-off between consumption and investment. That a dollar that you consume is a dollar you do not get to invest. That if you work and produce, you can eat what you produce, or wear what you produce, or live in what you produce. You can use it up, or you can defer your gratification and invest in the future. That trade-off means that, so up here, this indicates a high level of consumption and a low level of investment. Down here would indicate a low level of consumption and a high level of investment. When the economy works the way it works, when it's working the way it's supposed to, this is high. And investment gets circulated back into productive activity. And we do that through capital markets. Now this isn't going to look like economics, this is going to look like finance. This is called a yield curve. We can talk more about that later, but it basically reflects the idea that there is a trade-off between yield and risk. That the higher the level of risk, the more yield that you want to compensate yourself for that level of risk. So a short-term investment is less risky than a long-term investment because more things can go wrong in 20 years than can go wrong in 1 year. So that represents the fact that investments always go through some kind of vehicle, a stock or a bond or a short-term bond or something like that. So when we reinvest in productive activity, what does that do? Well, more money going into investments means a lower interest rate. If there's a lot of people who are saving, capital is abundant. And so it's easy to get investment capital. And so what does that do to productive activity? It takes productive activity and expands it. And what does that do when we're more productive? What does it do to the economy? What does it do to wealth creation? Well, this production possibilities frontier gets bigger. The pie grows. The trade-offs aren't quite so stark. The wealth effect shows an increase. And what does that do to investments? Well, if there's more money, if there's more wealth to invest. And to the degree that you have more wealth accumulation, you actually feel more comfortable deferring gratification even more. You're not just trying to scratch out a living and feed yourself for today, but you have the ability to think about the future more. And so what does that do to investment? It increases the amount of investment. It moves you further along this line, away from excessive consumption to more investment. And what does that do to the interest rates and the yields? What does that do to the availability of capital? It drives it down even more. And what does that do to productivity? This should seem familiar. Productivity expands. And what happens to wealth creation? Wealth creation expands. And what happens to the availability of capital? Well, that gets bigger. And what happens to people's willingness to invest in the future? Well, they shift in that direction. So this expands on and on and on. A virtuous cycle. A cycle in which good behavior creates the conditions for better behavior in the future, and it goes on and on. And that explains the miracle of Western civilization. That's how, for instance, the United States of America, back in the 1600s, was basically just as poor as everybody else. And then, over a period of 300 years, it gradually breaks off from the rest of the pack and looks like that. Leaps ahead of civilizations 2,500 years older. Why? Because Americans are a better race? No, there is no American race. We're drawn from all race. Because there's something magic about the soil? No, there are places in the world that are far more natural resource rich. It is because the acknowledgement of how the economy works when it's supposed to, with God in the center, productive activity in the middle, people as a blessing, not as a curse, the ability to look into the future and say, I'm not an animal. I don't have to eat it all today. I can look into the future and plan for the future and reinvest and make risk levels drop is what took the United States into this great leap where it outdistanced the rest of the world. And then as these ideas were adopted by other nations in Western civilization, we see that happening in other countries, but some down and down in a vicious cycle, not a virtuous cycle. That's how the economy works when it works the way it's supposed to. And that's why, by the way, I left something out here that's very important. You know, we can consume, we put back into ourselves, we can invest, we can put back into our productive activities. But a very important aspect of this is that we give back to the God who made us. That is maybe the most economically productive thing you can do. Why? Because it calibrates you. It reminds you that He's in the center, how this system works, so that you are less likely to stray from it and create an economic system that works the way it works when it's working the way it's not supposed to. The economy, as you know, doesn't always work this way. You don't have to look far in the world to see that things can go horribly, horribly wrong. How they go wrong is what we're going to look at in the next segment.